Hello and welcome. This is Corangela. Welcome to the End of Slavery Summit. I am here with John Roeland. He is a writer, natural law teacher, sociologist, poet, and hip hop artist. And he has a website, naturalfreedomleague.com. That's naturalfreedomleague.com. I've known him for several years now since I've started producing content, and I'm glad to have got back in contact with you. You've put out a lot of great content. I always know you and Will Keller do collaborations together. Today we're going to be talking about a really important topic, the big lie, you call it, why the belief in government persists. Well, welcome to the summit. If you want to introduce a little bit more about yourself and what do you mean by the big lie? Why is that so important to understand?
Yeah, thanks, Corey. I appreciate you inviting me here, and I think it's great what you're doing, and I look forward to seeing the final product. It's very unique. I like the format you're doing it in, and I appreciate all the work you've been putting out, man. You are prolific, as they say. So
As are
I
you.
appreciate that. Um, yeah, so as Corey said, I grew up in the Bay Area, California. We call it the Bay Area as if there's no other Bay Area in the world, but the San Francisco Bay Area, East Bay, past Oakland, so in the suburbs. And grew up. Bay Area is very liberal, and grew up very liberal minded, but always with a sense of something is wrong with the world. One thing I always think about is my mother always being sort of enamored with the Kennedy era and Camelot, they called it. And yet knowing that he had been assassinated, and something in my intuition telling me that the official story was not correct. And this is right when I was at least in high school. I don't know when I first started becoming aware of that, but I remember asking my mother, don't you care what really happened? Don't you want to find out what really happened? And that was when I would get the reply, well, what can I do? Right? I'm just a person. What can I do? And so that was sort of the beginning of my, looking at, contradictions in the official story that we were told, and what was really going on in the world. And I also was interested a lot in Martin Luther King Jr. I am of mixed ethnicity. Some people, recognize that. Some people don't. My mother is Cape Verdean, which is off the west coast of Africa. And so, but they're mixed with Portuguese. So my mother's very light skinned. But growing up, my mother would have been discriminated against as a black person. People can tell that she's mixed much more than they can tell I am. And but growing up in that atmosphere and then listening to hip hop, I sort of identified with the struggle and got into Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, what they were doing, the civil rights movement. As I went into to college, learning more about the Black Panthers, and specifically learning there how the government infiltrated the Black Panthers and broke them apart from inside, like basically sent in people to break up the movement from the inside out. And this is called COINTELPRO. You can look this up. It's Hoover, said that they were the most dangerous group in America. And so, this kind of led me down that path of, the government was not to be trusted, and what was really going on, and what's the solution. And this is a long journey that we go on, right? Like when I first got out of high school, I remember being excited to be able to research things that I wanted to learn about. I did focus a lot on religion. I was drawn at an early age to a lot of New Age information, kind of going down that path, spirituality, as well as sort of questioning the official narrative. So yeah, and then it's honestly been a slow progression. I mean, I think uncovering within the last I'd say starting in 2016, getting involved with the health freedom movement in California, understanding the dangers of vaccinations, and getting involved with protests and things like that. I became more active, and then discovering the work of Mark Passio and understanding natural law, and really looking at that as the solution. And that also inspired me to take further action. What I saw was, in the health freedom movement, you had a lot of groups who were sort of grassroots propaganda to push back against the big pharmaceutical propaganda. And I thought, well, what if we came out here to these political events and we taught about natural law and we taught about the illegitimacy of government? And so that's how Natural Freedom League started, me going out on the streets. And then that led to me meeting Will Keller, as you said, and some local people that we, kind of joined into a group. Almost like a self-help group, honestly. We meet on Sundays and talk, but we would meet at these live events as well. And then eventually it led to the podcast and then these conferences, the Freedom Under Natural Law conferences that we've put on. So it's been quite a whirlwind. And as I listened and learned about anarchy from the different researchers and teachers, Mark Passio, Larkin Rose, and again, being involved in the health freedom movement and following the work of, Del Bigtree and the High Wire, and, trying to, I have my own life as a father, and trying to navigate how do we find solutions to this? How can I play my part to wake people up? And, I'm just going to go into this. This is a bit of my coming out party, Corey. When I was involved in the health freedom movement, I used to hear people say, "Oh, what? You're an anti-vaxxer? What are you, a flat earther too?" And I always thought, what a weird thing to say, right? Like, you're talking about this thing that happens very personally to people, that their kid gets injured and they have concerns, and they, and it's very real, genuine concern of something that actually happened to you. And to equate that to the most extreme conspiracy that you could think of, I always thought that was odd, that that phrase was sort of in the nomenclature of society. And so I remember at the time, this must be around 2017, I thought, well, how would I know? Right? Like, that's basically what I thought about the flat earth thing. Like, how would I really know? Right? I haven't been in a spaceship, like, yes, I've been in an airplane, but, I haven't really paid that much attention to it. So I had an openness to, I don't know, like, I haven't really looked into it.
Right.
And so seeing people in the freedom movement react so emotionally about the flat earth theory kind of made me even more intrigued. And so it's a funny story. One time I was with some friends, and we hadn't seen each other in a while. And I was always the conspiracy guy, right? Even before Benny Wills. No, just kidding. But I would always go over, and they would always have like the new conspiracy, right? Well, have you heard of this? Have you heard of this? And some of these conspiracies are, they're, I'll say innocent, but they're very interesting, but they were kind of getting into a political conversation, and I brought up, a lot of, hey, well, all of these people are Satanists, and they were like, well, where are you getting this information from? And I kind of told them about what on earth is happening, and I was getting kind of passionate about it, because at the time I was really into Mark's work, and it was opening my mind to, how they mind control us. And, these guys are arguing over, Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton. And, and I'm like, they're all on the same team. It's the whole system is working against us. And my friend, who I grew up with, he got very upset at me. And he said, "I'm not a flat earther either, John." And it was right in that moment that I'm like, I'm going to go look into this, I'm going to go, like, it's like because I remember saying to him, well, Mark Passio's not either, I'm like, but it was like, he kept saying to me, another thing he kept saying to me was, it's all conjecture. It's conjecture. And I'm thinking, isn't almost everything conjecture? right? Like, how do we know? I mean, he's talking about a book he was reading about Napoleon and how Napoleon was fighting the against the Catholic Church, or and I'm like, how do you know that that's real, right? Like, I
Exactly.
mean, yeah, great. Like, you're reading a book, and I hope you're sourcing it and you're looking deeply into it, but that could be considered conjecture as well, right? I mean,
Right.
for me to say all of these guys are, they're in secret societies, they're, oh, that's conjecture. Well, it's not though. It's not. Like, when the same thing happens over and over and over again, you start to recognize a pattern if you're willing to open your mind and see that.
Right.
So anyway, I did go down the flat earth rabbit hole, and I found the work of Eric Dubay. And to me, it made sense. It
Mm-hmm.
made sense to me. And I was able to, I think this is very important. I was able to, and this isn't meant to be a flat earth talk, but
Right.
I just want to be open about this. And, I've mentioned it before, but I think it's kind of gone over people's heads. But um, there's two models, right? And if you can get out of the model that we're in, the globe model, and look at the other model and look at them separately, um, then you apply what you experience. So, one thing I wanted to talk about is point of reference, right? So, when we're having a debate about something like this, like, what is your point of reference that you're coming from? And to me, once I got to that level of looking at those two models, my point of reference became, what do I observe with my five senses? And it really opened up my mind to, I've lived my whole life not really paying attention to what the sun and the moon do every day. I mean, this is going to make me sound kind of dumb, but I'm okay with that. But at that moment, I think I didn't realize that the moon rose in the east and set in the west, just like the sun did. I mean, I literally think my whole life, I never really considered that
Yeah.
until that moment. And it also had me flash back to junior college when I took an astronomy class, and I really struggled with understanding the phases of the moon as it's taught in college. And not that the flat earth explains the phases of the moon, but it definitely, it clicked to me like, well, no wonder I didn't understand it, because that it's not, that's not what's happening. You can see the moon in the sky in its phase, right? Like, as a crescent or as a semicircle, waxing and waning while the sun is in the sky. So
Yeah.
if this was based on the position of the moon and the earth, now that doesn't make any sense, right? And it didn't make sense to me then. What's interesting is I remember I just ended up putting down what the teacher told me to put down to get the grade. Yeah, but I remember not understanding it. Like, wait, how can the sun, like, how can the moon, why is the moon, why is it, if the earth is moving, why does it look, when you see the moon cut in half, it doesn't look like anything is moving. It's just cut in half,
Yeah.
And so anyway, moving on from that, again, in the community, being involved, Natural Freedom League, we became a part of the One Great Work Network, and hearing how emotional people in the freedom movement, I call it the freedom movement, separate from the truth and freedom movement.
Mm.
I think they're two separate things right now. I think that freedom relates to truth,
Yeah.
but I think that some people in the freedom movement are just focused on like creating freedom, and they're not concerned anymore with uncovering the truth. And that's what made me think of, wanting to talk about this. I mean, I've thought about making presentations on this. I have actually started like an outline of a presentation on it. But the concept of the big lie. I'm going to read a little excerpt here from
Sure.
good old Wikipedia.
Sure.
But Wikipedia is a good place to kind of start your research. A big lie is a gross distortion of or misrepresentation of the truth, used especially as a propaganda technique. The German expression was coined by Adolf Hitler when he dictated his book Mein Kampf to describe the use of a lie so colossal that no one would believe that someone could have the impudence to distort the truth so infamously. Hitler claimed that the technique had been used by the Jews to blame Germany's loss in World War I on German General Erich Ludendorff, who was a prominent nationalist political leader in the Weimar Republic. According to historian Jeffrey Herf, the Nazis used the idea of the original big lie to turn sentiment against the Jews and justify the Holocaust. Herf maintains that Joseph Goebbels and the Nazi Party actually used the big lie technique that they described, and that they used it to turn long-standing anti-Semitism in Europe into mass murder. Herf further argues that the Nazis' big lie was their depiction of Germany as an innocent, besieged land striking back at international Jewry, which the Nazis blamed for starting World War I. Nazi propaganda repeatedly claimed that Jews held power behind the scenes in Britain, Russia, and the United States. It further spread claims that the Jews had begun a war of extermination against Germany and used these to assert that Germany had a right to annihilate the Jews in self-defense. So there's a quote that you might have heard. It says, tell a lie, make it big. The bigger the lie, the more people will believe it. I've actually looked into these. Supposedly that's attributed to Goebbels and Hitler. Now, Hitler, clearly, they say he did say something like this in Mein Kampf, but if you look into it, you can't really find a quote where Goebbels actually said it. But the reason why I think that this idea is important is because I see conversations online, which I really hate participating in, the social media debates. It just seems really unproductive.
I agree.
But I watch it though. I go there for the drama. But I really see, I see people in the truth community, well, the freedom community, saying, why would they lie? And it's like, it really seems like cognitive dissonance to me, because haven't we already talked about why they lie, right? So if you take it from the natural law perspective, they're lying to hide natural law. Okay, I think that that's part of it, right? But that doesn't mean that there isn't worthwhile things to investigate and find out what is being told to us that contradicts reality. Again, back to that point of reference, what we observe. And then again, through using the trivium process, which I think most people know what that is, but the trivium is, grammar, taking in the information, grammar, logic, right? Thinking it over, like letting it mill in your head. And that's where you weed out the contradictions. And then rhetoric, you put out, your understanding of it. You're able to explain it in your way. And now in that process, you might have the same data that I have, but you might come up to a different conclusion. What's important is you being authentic, being able to speak your mind and share your perspective and put that information out there so we can further the conversation. And the same for me, to be able to be authentic and say, well, this is my perspective on it. And that we should all be open-minded, and we should be having this debate, and we should be trying to have discipline in our discernment. And what I mean by that is, if you have, this is just one example. I've written down a lot of examples, but I'm going to use this one. You have someone like Joe Rogan, who, I don't know how long ago, maybe 5-10 years ago, was the go-to guy on the moon landing conspiracy. I mean, you can find videos of Joe Rogan really, expertly breaking down all of the problems with the moon landing. The pictures, the loss of the telemetry data, the fact that they destroyed the technology to go there, the interview of the astronauts after. I mean, they all look like they saw a ghost. They look like it looks like they're lying. They all seem very uncomfortable. All this different stuff. And Joe Rogan used to really go into this at the beginning of his podcast. And then one day he had Neil deGrasse Tyson on, and he brought it up to Neil deGrasse Tyson. And you can find this clip out there. Neil deGrasse Tyson said, well, we know they went to the moon because they had enough fuel in the rocket to take them to the moon and back. And that fuel is gone. And that convinced Joe Rogan to not discuss that conspiracy anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how you take that. Someone else may take that differently. I have a friend who's not as much of a conspiracy theorist as me, but he just said, well, John, some people change their opinion. To me, that doesn't logically make sense. Right? I've never seen Neil deGrasse Tyson, really debunk or prove that the moon landing actually happened. He talks, he's a propagandist, so my point is, once Joe Rogan did that, I always if I watch Joe Rogan now, I watch it knowing that he's censoring himself, or someone is censoring him. He won't go, and he'll have his buddy on to come on and be the conspiracy guy, and he'll sit there and push back, and now he'll wear the NASA jacket and the NASA, and it's like
Eddie Bravo, right?
Right. Eddie Bravo is like Joe Rogan's like conspiracy friend, right? And but to me, in the truth community, we should kind of know that Joe Rogan is not in the business of truth, right? Joe Rogan is there to kind of be a gatekeeper, and I do watch his show sometimes, and it can be kind of interesting. But if we are disciplined with what we're listening to and who we're listening to, I feel like the saying, know the truth and the truth shall set you free, is true. Because once we understand that the moon landing was faked, right? And no, that doesn't prove that the earth is flat, but it does prove that NASA is fraudulent. They're lying to us for some reason, and we should be concerned about why they're lying to us. I don't see the moon landing being faked as any less detrimental than 9/11, right? And this is why I say why government persists, because I think that we have people in the freedom movement who are excellent at promoting freedom and promoting the idea of why government is immoral and illegitimate. But if you go talk to a person and you tell them that we don't need government, they're going to go to one of these big lies as the reason why we do need government. And whether it be climate change or whether it be, a pandemic, right? Like, if we can, as a truth and freedom community come together. We need to look at each other as modern day philosophers, and we need to hold each other accountable for the things that we say, and um, and be able to have open dialogue and critique each other. Um, and so yeah, that's the basic point of what I wanted to talk about today.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a
any
good point.
thoughts?
No, I think you made a really interesting point toward the end there, like connecting everything that you've said thus far, because anybody who's listening who has somewhat of an open mind would be willing to hear you out. They don't have to agree with you. You're not asking for them to agree with you. You're asking for
Exactly.
the dialogue. Never once did I hear within what you just said, you have to agree with me. You know what I mean?
Right.
But people will take that and say, well, you're presuming this and this and that. No, you're sharing it. You're not
Right.
saying if it is true or it isn't. You're getting people to question things. And a lot of people know that this term conspiracy theorist has been used as an attack to suppress dissent, to suppress people questioning the official narratives. And you're right. The government is tied into a lot of these agencies. A lot of these agencies are created by the governments. And how do they get their funding? Through us, through people giving their money to this system. And we don't know what they're doing with this money. And then if they're doing these lies that you're talking about, well, that's obviously, using our money for the wrong reasons. That just still justifies their system. So, I say this too, sort of like what you were saying. It's sort of a justification. They're justifying their own system using their own system. So it's like the Hegelian dialectic. You create a problem, you create a reaction, then you create a solution. If you're in control of all three, you can steer the narrative any which way you want. And that's dangerous. The fact that anybody has the ability to change the world at any time and decide, okay, let's kill all these people, let's go to war, let's bring these people here, means that people are so vulnerable and willing to suppress their conscience to give it away to some person who tells them to do that, regardless if it's right or wrong. So I agree, there needs to be skepticism within everybody, but that doesn't mean that we're skeptical and we shut each other out to different ideas. No, skeptical
Right.
means you look at everything, which means you're still open enough to look at everything, but then question it.
Right.
So it's not
Yeah.
like you're closing certain things off completely.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to bring up a term that it does go around the flat Earth community, but it's Zeticism, and
Right.
it's Zeticism is if I looked it up in the dictionary, it's proceeding by inquiry. It says skeptic, seeker, specifically one of a group of Pyrrhonist philosophers. So I did a little research into Pyrrho, Pyrrho. He's a philosopher who came before Plato,
Mm.
and he was a skeptic. Now, it's really interesting when you listen to philosophy. Obviously, sometimes philosophy can be like the snake eating its tail, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
like, it's like, wait a minute, like, where are we going with this? And they talk about how skeptics, like real hardcore skeptics, would be like, you can't believe anything. But then they'd say, but that's a belief, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're contradicting yourself, right? But the idea of Zeticism being that um, knowing that what you actually know is very limited, and again, going back to that point of reference, that what you know is something that you've actually experienced, right? And now, it requires, when you're researching, you're looking into, like, I see people who are arguing, for the globe, right? Or, against flat earthers, and they'll bring up ancient, uh, hieroglyphics, right? And the Sumerians knew all the planets, and like,
Right.
okay, so first of all, we can't even trust what happened 20 years ago, right? Like, but we're gonna base what we're talking about, our point of reference is a tablet that's in a museum somewhere that we're getting through third, fourth hand knowledge, pictures of, and again, what your conclusion of that tablet is is going to vary amongst different linguists, right, who are looking at these things. So it's like, to me, I feel like we have to let go of that, and we have to get back to this skeptical position, and of our point of reference is what we can experience ourselves, what we experience ourselves.
Hmm.
I don't say that that means you don't read a book or you don't trust anything,
Right.
but I think there does need to be an awareness of how much disinformation has been put out there to muddle everything.
Sort of like muddling our common sense, right? Or like the simple basics of this life. Like, because if we get so wrapped in so many other things, then we kind of lose focus, do we?
Right.
It's like also
Absolutely.
it's also the individual versus the collective. If we get so focused on doing what's for the greater good or for the common good, as the elites make this justification for their systems of control, well, then we are going to be controlled because we're taking the
Right.
power away from ourselves for this greater good that we believe in. This
Right.
faith that we have, like, oh, it's for everybody, for every good, and all these justifications. Again, to make a right, not that it's actually right. That's what the word justificare means.
Right. So the definition of skepticism that I got, and I just got this out of dictionary online, an attitude of doubt or disposition to incredulity, either in general or toward a particular object. Next, the doctrine that true knowledge or knowledge in a particular area is uncertain. And then finally, the method or suspended judgment, systematic doubt or criticism, characteristic of skeptics. So, like, again, there, suspended judgment, systematic doubt. I really believe that that's the position we all should be coming from. We have been lied to enough that when you hear a conspiracy, you should doubt it. When you hear anything, you should start from a position of doubt. It's on NASA to prove their claims, right? It's not on a bunch of people who are questioning NASA to prove that NASA, who gets billions of dollars a year, are lying. Or let's take it away from NASA. Let's talk about the germ theory, right? They have spent millions of dollars. The pharmaceutical industry, our government has spent millions of dollars focusing on germs and has yet to show an isolated germ. And I see, people that I respect in the truth and freedom movement, discrediting that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I, the other day, this came up recently. Derek Bros interviewed Del Bigtree, and Derek asked people what they wanted him to talk about, and of course, a lot of people wanted him to talk about germ theory, which Del has had Andy Kaufman on his show, but that was it. He hasn't gone down the germ theory route since then, and Del focuses in this. He's in their dialectic. I call it trapped in a dialectic. He's one side of this Hegelian dialectic of germ theory, and Dell is doing good work in showing that even in that model, they have issues, right? They're not testing these vaccines. They're not, these diseases that they're claiming are these, viruses are not that deadly based on their own numbers. But Dell's position was he didn't want to leave that arena because there's so much money in that arena and focus on that arena that it wouldn't make sense to step out of that. But if you step out of it, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I mean, I haven't looked into germ theory as much as I would like to in the future. I would definitely like to look into it more, but my understanding of it is that they have not isolated a virus and proven that they haven't isolated it. First of all, that's the first problem. And they haven't proven that anything like that causes disease.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently they've done experiments where they've given whatever they do when they get some type of thing that they say is a virus, and they've given it to people, and people have not gotten sick from it.
Mm.
And the rebuttal to Derek and Dell's interview, there was a video by Andy Kaufman, Thomas Cowan, and another couple of people. And Thomas Cowan was making the point that if you cannot prove that a virus exists after all of this money has been spent to build this infrastructure of germ theory, disease, which is what the pharmaceutical industry is based on, then that's it. that's it's on them to prove that. And until they do, we shouldn't participate in that debate of, I mean, obviously we should participate in the debate of my right to not put something in my body. That, I'll give Del Bigtree that. However, to continue to push this idea that there's these viruses and that they make us sick, if it's true that it has not been proven, then I think that that is a very big waste of our time and energy. And again, if you're using the trivium, that's a contradiction that you're supposed to weed out, right? Until it is affirmed or it's proven, that should be a contradiction that we push aside. And I think with germ theory, I mean, I think a lot of people, Thomas Cowan in the interview said this, that they made the mistake of doing this lockdown based on a virus, because that made people discover that, viruses aren't real, and that, this whole system is fraudulent. However, I do think one problem is like, I think they probably realize that. And I think the next time that they do try to lock us down, it won't be with a virus. I think that they played their hand on that. And so, but moving forward for us as a freedom and truth community, we should all unite under this idea that they haven't proven that yet. And, and I'll see people say, well, why do people get sick? Why does my kid go to preschool, come home with a cold, and then I get sick? That's a good question, but it has not been proven that that's because of a virus, despite millions of dollars being spent by that industry to say that is the case. So, and that's, it's been a big point of contention for people like Derek. I know he's caught a lot of flack for it. And it's not that I'm saying I'm not open to listening to that side, but it does seem to me to be a waste of energy to continue to play in that arena when you could really look at that arena as that Hegelian dialectic that they have us in. And right. It's as Mark Passio calls it, like a cul-de-sac, right? Like if we can, I think we should step out of that, and we should say, you know what, until you prove that you have isolated a virus and that it actually infects people, then we're letting that go, and we move forward with discovering, maybe we do discover why people get ill, or we find ways to create natural health, which I do think there is a lot of people doing that in the movement. But unfortunately, we get caught up in these debates, which I guess in a way I'm kind of perpetuating right now by even bringing this up. But I thought it was important to bring it up because it is something that I care about, and it's something that I see a lot of. I just think it's cognitive dissonance in the freedom community, where again, like the idea of, well, why would they lie? It's like, that's something that a normie would say, right? Like it's like, we should all know why they would lie. They're lying to obfuscate the truth, right? Like they're lying to, like you said, muddling everything.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned, there's no freedom without truth. Even conversely, you can't even have solutions or information without freedom. So these two work together, freedom and truth. And so it's important you mentioned this because, again, it's like freeing our minds. And we know that our minds create the world around us. That's the principle of mentalism in natural law. So I think it's all really important concepts, and we can't just sweep it under the rug. Obviously, a lot of people who care about these subjects, about freedom, run into these topics. Why? Because they are looking down the rabbit hole and they see there's a history of government issues, and it only gives more reason to abolish the government or understand that the government is not our best friend here. How much it's lied to us over history. I mean, just literally thousands of years of propaganda toward one agenda or the next. Regardless of what people think about them, it's certain people with their wills and opinions being imposed on others with or without anyone's consent. Whether people want it or not, whether it's moral or not. And that should concern people within itself. So that is, I think, what you're kind of hitting at from my point of view. And I appreciate the fact that you're like encouraging that skepticism, but also the open-mindedness, the bigger picture to things.
All
Okay,
right.
so I have no problem with that. And if people want to take this and turn it into a debate, that's on them. But if they understand the context that we're presenting here, we're saying free your mind.
Right.
Like,
Right.
don't get limited, don't get stuck. Like, if you say, oh my gosh, he's talking about flat earth, now I got to write a whole essay talking about why he's right
Yeah.
or wrong, then you probably don't get the point of what we're trying to say.
Right.
Like, we're trying to say there's people who will completely shut it off, and then there's people who will spend all their life energy on that. you
Right.
know?
And also for me, if I look at this, if I look at flat Earth as an example, and it rings true to me, and I don't feel like I'm out there. I don't feel like I'm not religious. Like, I mean, I am spiritual. I've always believed in a higher power, but that's not what made me believe, that, hey, this makes sense, or see that this makes sense to me. Um, then I should have the authenticity and the courage to speak that. And I'll be honest with you, for a lot of, the content that I've put out, I've held back. I've, you know, I, I don't necessarily think that, I would want to talk about flat earth all the time. However, for me, it is something that I've looked at and I go, yeah, that makes sense to me. Two, I haven't seen anybody really debunk it yet, even the people that are really emotionally triggered by it. And three, the fact that people get emotionally triggered by it makes me think there's something to it. But
hmm
it it shapes my view of the world, and I should be authentic, say my position,
Right.
not fear any repercussion from what someone thinks or whether or not someone's going to like me. And for people who would take that stance, I would say you're doing a disservice to the truth and freedom movement, because um, philosophers sat down and they talked about this stuff and they worked it out, and they may not have come to a solution. Like I said, sometimes it is like the snake chasing its
Yeah.
tail, but this is what we're here to do. I do think, for me, like Plato said in the Apology, as Socrates, um, I'm wiser than him because I know that I don't know. Right now, add to that piece, you don't know, but yet you're always striving to know, even though you have that position of, it's limited what I can know, right? So it's a balance between that skepticism, but then also understanding there is an objective reality, right? So, as an example, one thing I was listening to this morning, it says, the wind blows and you feel it as a warm wind and I feel it as a cold wind. Can we actually come to the true nature of that wind? No. But what can we discover? There was wind,
Right.
right? It's like and it's there is an objective reality that exists. Truth is what has occurred, what is. So, as I'm being a skeptic, but I'm not so skeptic to say you can never know anything.
Right.
But I'm saying, like, let's be honest about, again, I don't know what the earth looks like from far away. I don't know what the shape of
Right.
the earth is, but
I
I
call
do know
I
what
call
I
this natural
observe
facts. Yeah.
is, here's the north, the Polaris, everything goes around it, that it contradicts this idea that we're spinning around and
Yeah.
the
Do you
moon
have?
is
Is that a
spinning. And
ball? So you have two models right beside each other?
yeah, I did that just for, because I used to have this. This was my logo, like lots of people have this as their logo. This represents to us, unity, right? This is like, this when you have this logo up, this symbol up, you're saying we're all one world, it's all one thing, right? And that's an important thing.
The
But
context. Yeah.
yeah, but it's like, I understand now that, like, we're probably not on a spinning ball moving through outer space, and everything I've looked at has supported that. So again, I wouldn't call myself a flat earther. I think that is a part of the psyop, right? The psyop is to get us divided, right? So if you are getting emotionally charged about it and ad hominem attacking people, you're playing right into the psyop, right? The you know the when they give us a psyop, right? It is a Hegelian dialectic, but one side of that is probably true, right? So yes, it's a psyop. It doesn't mean that this model is right or that model is right. It could be a separate model. It could be something totally different. So, but if
Discernment.
I'm if my point of reference is, I go outside every day, and every day the sun moves around me and the moon moves around the north, the Polaris, the North Star, and that star doesn't move. And that's how people sailed the earth and did everything, all of that, for years. That contradicts what I've been told. When I see the moon in the sky in its phase, and I'm told that that's from a shadow or from the position of the earth. Well, the earth is right here. The earth's right here. The moon's right there. How, like, is there like a mirror? it's like showing me the moon, like the moon's really over here, and we're blocking it. And so yeah, I mean, I think I've always thought that I've always seen the flat earth model as should be a point of unity in the truth movement, if we are using the trivium, and we're using that point of reference of what we observe. And I wanted to add one thing here. I had written,
Sure.
I've talked about this before. So there's a quote: "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it or rejecting it," right?
Hmm.
And so everyone says that this is an Aristotle quote. So I love that quote, right? So I go look it up, and I had actually created like a little video series. This is like one of the original video series I did, and it was going to be called Entertaining Thoughts. I've made a few videos of it on the Natural Freedom League, and and so I look it up, and I find out that's not actually what Aristotle said. Okay, so this quote is attributed to Aristotle by a man
There's a
named
lot of
Lowell L.
quotes.
Bennion, right? Oh yeah, that's, if you look up, like I said, even those quotes with like Goebbels, I always hear people say, "Oh, make a lie, tell a lie, make
It's
it
easy
big,"
to just make up a quote and put someone's
Yeah,
name on it.
you research it, you do a little bit of research, they're like, there's actually no evidence he ever said it. He maybe said this, which made people say that that's what he said. But so that's good, though. That's how we should be looking at that. So the actual quote, and I think this is important,
Okay.
it's a little deep, but this is from Aristotle, from Nicomachean Ethics. "It is right that we ask people to accept each of the things which are said in the same way, for it is the mark of an educated person to search for the same kind of clarity in each topic, to the extent that the nature of the matter accepts it." Okay, so what is that saying?
Makes sense.
It is saying that we should be asking all these questions, right? When someone says to you, "Well, what does it matter, the shape of the earth?" It does matter. Are we? I thought it was the truth movement. Like, what do you mean? What does it matter? Like, if it's the truth, then it matters. And what he's saying is we should apply the same process, which would be the trivium, to each topic. And he goes on to say, for it is similar to expect a mathematician to speak persuasively or for an orator to furnish clear proofs. Each person judges well what they know and is thus a good critic of those things. For each thing in specific, someone must be educated to be a critic. To be a critic in general, one must be educated about everything. So I think what he's talking about is that's what a philosopher is. A philosopher is educated in everything and is willing to look at everything. And, as Einstein called it, even though Einstein might not really be the most trustworthy guy, but he called it, what did he call it? The unified field theory, that eventually there would be a theory that unified all the theories, right? And ultimately, isn't that the journey that we're on, right? Like, does it end at natural law? I don't think
Exactly.
so. I don't think
Exactly.
so. I think natural law is a part of it, but once we understand natural law, we're going to have a whole world to explore again, and to apply our trivium to, and our point of reference to, and our senses to,
Right.
and I think that that's really powerful and really important. And I do think most of the people in the truth and freedom community, I do consider us philosophers, but I think we need to make an effort to be more open-minded to having these conversations. I do appreciate you, Corey. I've seen you having these conversations, and it's rare, in the community that we're in. Like, a lot of people shun these ideas,
I agree.
and I'm kind of here today, like I said, it's kind of like my coming out party in a way, to say, what, like, I'm gonna say what I think, and
That's you as a human being. That's you being authentic, like you said. And are we not to do that? Are we not trying to promote an honest world? There's nothing wrong with that. Like I had a hard stance on veganism within the community of people applying human rights to animal rights. And if you look at the Weston A. Price Foundation, for example, you might be aware of what they do, because they talk a lot about what you talked about with viruses. They wrote books about it. They had doctors together, and they talk a whole bunch about that. They also talk about a lot of traditional living and how people used to raise animals and integrate them with regenerative agriculture. So they have so many resources, but so many people are unaware of it. And if they're willing to just shut it off right away without even knowing about it, without even first looking into it, I mean, it's like,
right,
how could we even have a conversation?
right,
How could we be philosophers? Philosophy means, by definition, love of knowledge, you know?
right,
And
exactly,
so that's why it's like, is it philosophy if we don't love all knowledge? All knowledge is helpful. It helps us. That's why we learn,
right,
Now, there might be some knowledge that might deceive us, that might distract us, but that's on part of our own bias. It depends on what we do with that knowledge that
right,
matters. When we
right,
turn into action and such. And you mentioned Eric DeBay, too. I just want to mention, he's very open with his community. He communicates with a lot of people. And
yeah,
he's done a lot of work over the years, not just Flat Earth. He's done
right,
so many other works, including talking about governments. So just because
yeah,
you may disagree with him on one thing does not mean you have to disagree with him on everything or shun out his works either. It's
right,
like he specifically details scripts, and he's got sources, and he just names the sources. He doesn't add his own bias at all. I mean, you're talking, he's just listing what he got from the past and all the different observations. He's not,
right,
again, saying like you have to agree with him. No one ever said that. But people will go
right,
off and attacking him, saying they're dumb, they're stupid. It's like, why resort to attacks? What good does
right,
that do anybody? And one
right,
thing that I greatly admire about the Flat Earth movement, because let's face it is a movement,
yeah,
they actually have a movement. Like,
right,
I've started Nature is the Answer and stuff like that to try to bring our actions together and more focused and more grounded. I really admire the fact that they have symbols and shared materials, and they're really unified and everybody knows who they are. They've
yeah,
succeeded in doing that. And there's a lot of
yeah,
other messages we find that's important, like natural law, that we want to get out to the world. But meanwhile, this one topic is nearly a lot on the spotlight because of their movement, of how much they've got the idea out there. So I give them props to how much they've got the ideas out there. Now, that's not to say like the mainstream kind of helped them and use that as a means to attack people and such. I'm sure
Right.
that's possible, but they do that with pretty much everything. I'm just saying that there is a great amount of effort involved in that movement, and I just greatly admire that. So I think we can definitely, like you said, discern and look through these different ways of thinking and just find out the truth throughout
Yeah.
instead of just
Right.
push it all under the rug.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think, try not, we should all don't need to be as emotional about it. And again, that's why I don't like participating in the Facebook debates about this stuff, like
Same.
let's get on camera, let's talk about it, let's
Right.
share information, let's agree to disagree,
It's
let's
more human.
put out our own videos, and then, you do a reply to my video, and,
Exactly.
and have that dialogue. Yeah, I think that's the main point that I came here to talk about today, is that we should strive to have a thorough discourse on all theories, move to reject those that are obviously false, weed out the contradictory beliefs, and remain disciplined in our discourse, and until new information becomes available that would, change that, perspective. I think whether you're a flat earther or not, you should know that the moon landing that they showed us was fake.
Mm.
You should probably know that you can't land on the moon, but that's okay if you're not there yet. But the moon landing that they showed us, if you think that there's anything authentic about that, I don't think you're applying, the trivium. You're not looking at the evidence that exists. And so yeah, that just as an example, it's like, and I have seen some people in the movement that are, they're aware of NASA. They're not, they don't claim to be flat earthers, but they think NASA's up to something else or whatever, and they probably are, but
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 their
yeah, I
actions
just
matter a lot. The fact that they are taking
right,
money from us and the fact that they're using that as a justification to say, give us money. It's like
exactly,
that's deception. So we have to call it out, or at least we have to hold them accountable. So that way they don't
exactly,
do something bad. Because if we just trust them and think, oh, everything they do is good, and it's all just people, and people don't lie, and everybody, there's a huge organization, and they never lie, then it's like, what if they do get away with something? Like it's good to always have eyes on something. You always need somebody there questioning what's going
right,
on.
right, yeah, exactly,
So,
exactly,
if you don't mind, I kind of want to ask like a final question about your personal journey.
sure,
But before we get into that, just to tie in a lot of what we talked about, when this relates to the belief in government, because obviously this is a main theme among the summit and with a lot of speakers, and a lot of people still have a hard time with, trying to get past this idea of, are these people that we call government, do they actually exist? Do they have the right to rule over us? And all of that. In understanding natural law, or not even understanding that perspective, or just understanding statism alone, or how authority is an exemption to basic morality, these are all things where if you were open to a lot of the other things we talked about before, you're probably going to be open to this.
right,
So you're right, it ties in greatly. And again, to have an open mind to all these things would help in our process. What I see time and time again, if I look at the American Revolution or the abolitionists from the 1800s, is a shared love between humankind. Like, I
right,
care about you, I don't have to agree with you, but you're my fellow brother, you're my fellow man. You may have a different skin color from me, you might be a total different person, but who cares? Like, we're
right,
fellow man, we have the same rights, and we can understand that violence is wrong no matter what. So I think we can do the same thing across all these different topics. It's like we just have love for our fellow man. I just greatly appreciate that. So,
yeah.
where did you break that belief of statism in your own head? Like, how long were you a statist, and how did you get out of that?
Yeah, I voted in 2016. I think that when Obama got elected, I believed that he was an outsider, and I thought that it was significant that he had won. And I quickly learned that he was just part of the same group of people. He was selected, and
Mm.
it came pretty clear to me after he got elected, like how it worked. I mean, I think the fact that um, the fact that John McCain picked Sarah Palin as his running mate is sort of like solidified that Obama was going to win. I mean, they kind of put up a terrible uh, group to run against them. Even that's even considering that elections even matter, which I don't think they do. Going back to 2000 when Bush stole the election, I remember I was in college at the time. I remember calling my dad and saying, "Are you watching this? Are you watching them? They're stealing the election, right?" And so I was aware of the corruption. And again, when Obama came in, I thought it could be something different. I did have a little hope. And when he didn't hold the Bush administration accountable for any of the war crimes that they committed, and I knew that he was just, part of the same club. So by the time we get to 2016, I had opened my mind to the issues with vaccines, which is kind of crazy to me that it took that long. But I voted third party that year. I saw Trump and Clinton as like the same. They're two sides of the same coin, and voted third party. And from that point on, that was when I really got into the natural law, the anarchy information, and I began to really detach myself from that system as much as I possibly can. Obviously, it's difficult for us to detach ourselves from it completely, but it's in my mind to definitely try to detach from it. So I've unregistered to vote now. I think that's important. I think people should do that. I do think that there's a difference between believing in government and being politically active. And I think that when you unregister to vote, it doesn't mean that I can't still go and send a letter to my congressperson or my representative, and even just let them know that I think that their system is illegitimate, but maybe I want to discuss a certain issue with them, right? Like, even just to educate them. I'd actually like to take Natural Freedom League in that direction. I've thought about this for a
Good
long
idea.
time. You've done a lot of work like this, but writing letters, to law enforcement,
I'd be willing to
to
help to work with you on that. I'd be
yeah,
willing to collaborate with that. Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, your information, I could just send your information in all honesty. It's I think if we reach out to people in that way, it shows that like anarchy doesn't mean that we're not collaborating with people and then that we're not like working together.
Right.
It's just that what we're trying to do is educate people on the issues with the system as it exists, and I think letting those people know that there's people like us out there who have this knowledge and this understanding is important. And a lot of those people probably don't have that understanding. I mean, we we tend to think like everyone is nefarious and up to something. A lot of these people, they're just following a procedure, you know,
Yeah.
and doing what they've been taught is the right thing to do to be a good citizen. You participate, you run for office, and I think we can have an impact on that system without participating in it in the way that is generally expected of us in terms of voting and stuff like that. So yeah, that's
Great.
my stance on government at this point is I don't want it in my life. We talked a little bit earlier how I you know registered my fictitious business name as an entity, as a way to sort of separate myself from that system, but also acknowledging that that entity exists and that I can't destroy it. I could go burn my birth certificate, but they still have it registered as this entity is registered with us. And so there may be ways through state national stuff, or understanding the legal system, where we can reclaim our natural rights. And I think that that is a worthy area to explore, and that we
Yeah.
should all also be sharing strategies on that too. So
Yeah. But and to look at these other aspects too, I mean, they don't know much about, statism and this whole belief system as well. So it would help to integrate these communities. And like I said to you, I'd be willing to make a lot more of that happen. I mean, I know that the abolitionists did not use a lot of political action back then, but they still reached out to a lot of them, like you said. So like I'd be willing to do the same thing. Like
Yeah,
they again, they saw everybody as mankind, everybody as brothers and sisters. There was
yeah,
no exception to that. And there's no reason why we can't do the same thing here. We're doing the exact same thing they're doing, ending slavery just in another form. Obviously, it's a bigger form. It's one that they also acknowledged, but it's one that was destined for humanity in our eyes. We see we're meant to be free, and it's become evident over many years of history. And to conclude, would you have to say, because you obviously, I really like a lot of the things you had to say about independent media and such. I didn't want to ask you another question, but I think this is kind of important if you don't mind.
hmm
Like, do you think there's any particular action that independent media should be doing that they're not doing? I can be a little critical of them sometimes because I want us to move together in the right direction, toward freedom. And I think a movement is necessary. You may not. I want to just get
hmm
your thoughts on that. Like, do you think it might be necessary to have more of a unified message and mission, or like what do you think would be required?
yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I think I think at the moment I don't, like how you're saying, like I don't think of it as a movement. It's so disjointed and there's so many different people. I think a lot of people in the independent media, um, they're doing good work, but they're maybe focusing on the wrong issues. So I would say, but again, everyone has to focus on what they think is important. I want people to be authentic, but when you uh, go down the road of investigating, you know, child abuse, right, and exposing it, that's great. But we've seen over and over again that nothing really comes of that, right? Like whatever you think happened to Jeffrey Epstein, I mean, I sort of think he was kind of given to us as to make us think that like something was happening.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that some of those issues that we get into are it's sort of a waste of our energy. And again, not saying that we
Yeah,
shouldn't be concerned about the children. I think that when you expose that information, that's about all is that's going to come of it. So, what you really do to protect children is work within your community to protect, people within, your family
good
and
point.
extended community. And, you make sure that your community is safe, your local community. Um, um, I think, continuing to collaborate with different people, continuing to be willing to have these types of discussions without emotion, and working together. I mean, I think you're doing an excellent job of bringing people together. I could make a better effort of that myself, just to
We all can.
yeah, we actually last time we went out, we did bring your flyers with us, and I think that type of action is important as well. But yeah, I think that just let's continue to have these dialogues. Focus on what you want to focus on, what you think is important, but
Yeah.
also be willing to listen to other people and hear what they're saying. And again, possibly we can get to a point where we do come to some unity on some of these issues. And again, some of them we don't have to come to an agreement on them, but we also don't have to reject each other
Just be
if we
aware of
don't
it, right?
agree on those things.
Because I
Exactly.
feel like so many people don't even know about each other's positions sometimes. Like some people act like they know about what natural law is or know what statism is. They don't actually really know about it. You ask them some
Right.
questions and like, what is? They actually don't really know. So I think that's an issue too. Is like independent media is probably not going to talk about it if they don't know about it because not enough
Right.
people in their comment sections are requesting it or talking about it. So it does start with you guys in the audience and everybody out there. Like it starts with
Right.
us. We
Exactly.
can't also like just depend on them to produce everything for us. But when we change our minds and we expect certain content, then I think the rest will come with it. If we realize
Yeah.
like, that statism is a root, something that we need to focus on, then I think it's gonna be where it's like you can't get your mind off of it. Because it's
Yeah.
like wow, the government gets its tentacles and everything. The problem is the government, not the all the other problems it's causing. It's like those
Yeah.
are symptoms, but then there's like this root that's always there, always creeping
Right.
into people's business. So,
Yeah. I
yeah,
think also I'll add this is that instead of thinking in terms of having to wake everybody up and that's the ultimate goal. That's the only way
Right.
that we're going to change the world, to focus more on the people that you can reach. And the solution should be to detach from this system and to build new systems. So, that's something I'll say, that I appreciate about like what Derek Bros is doing, because he's focusing on those
Yeah.
types of issues. Um, the only thing I'd say, and this kind of goes back to my talk, is sometimes it seems to mesh with this other part of the movement that is working with the system,
Mm.
right? And so to me, that's like a bit of a contradiction, right? It's like, but it's okay, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like we have to work through that.
Right.
But again, it's like, we see people talk. I see all the time. This drives me crazy. Oh, Fauci's going to go to jail. But, but it's like, Fauci's not going to jail. That system is never going to punish him. Never. Like we should know that by now,
Yeah.
and it's like, so you can't be concerned about Fauci going to jail. Right. And Del Bigtree, I've followed Del Bigtree for a long time. That's how he pulls people in. Right. He keeps saying that, give me money and I'm going to use my legal team to attack the system, and we're going to put these people in jail. We should all know, everyone in the truth community should know, those people are not going to jail.
Right.
They have his lawyer, Del Bigtree's lawyer, has the godfather of vaccines, Stanley Plotkin, on video being deposed, saying everything that the anti-vaccine movement has been saying. He has it on video, under oath, lying about the dangers of vaccines and what he knew and what he participated in. If we can't hold him accountable through that system, Robert F. Kennedy wrote a whole book about Fauci. And Robert F. Kennedy, if any lawyer was going to, bring someone up on charges through that system, it would have been Robert F. Kennedy Jr. with the information he had in that book. But nothing comes of it.
Yeah.
He makes millions of dollars off the book. Fauci becomes an idol on the other side, right? To his worshipers, he becomes more of an idol because they think Kennedy's an idiot. And that's the game.
The system is inherently corrupt, you're saying, You
Exactly.
can't fix it. You got to sort of abolish it, as I say.
Exactly. Abolish it and like starve the beast, right?
Right.
Like don't, like, less focus on what the system is doing, more focus on what we're building. So if that starts with the independent media, great. Then getting involved in your local community, local outreach, like you're doing, like we're doing, but building on that and helping that to expand.
Mm-hmm.
I do think if we wrote letters to politicians, we wrote letters to law enforcement, that goes a long way. I mean,
influence.
the internet is great, but if someone gets a letter on their desk or sees a flyer, that's just as powerful for someone to pick that up and read it. And it may be more likely that you reach certain people that way than you would through the internet. So
Absolutely. And we talk to people all the time, professionals, doctors, former police, veterans, and they never expected to get across this knowledge. But then once it gets into their hands, they're like, wait, this is so powerful. We need to look at it. It even says in the Declaration of Independence, if we have to alter or abolish the government. If they said just change it, they would have just kept the word alter. But they also put the word abolish, There comes a time where it's necessary to do that. It literally says that word per word. So I think people need to understand, like, when is that time? It's like there is a time and place to get rid of it. So it's something that people have to just consider and look into. And going back to the point you mentioned before, I even criticize freedom cells too. Freedom cells, it's great. You have a lot of network of people coming together, but for what? I don't know.
Right.
It could be for anything. It could be for homesteading. It could be for talking about conspiracies. It could be for who knows? But, and that's where I think having grounded action is important. But thank you, John Roeland. It's been great having you. We talked about so many important things, and we covered a lot of great things. Pretty much everything we wanted to talk about, I would say. And I just want to thank you for coming on. I hope everybody checks out your works. naturalfreedomleague.com. That's naturalfreedomleague.com. John Roeland. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to say before we head off?
One last thing I want to say. Thank you, Corey. And I want to say Alex Jones is Bill Hicks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Everybody, if you want to see a lot more talks and speakers like this and a lot more gifts, go to nita.one/summit, nita.one/summit. This is the end of Slavery Summit. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.